At this time, I will turn the program over to Kevin Byrne, Chief Executive Officer with the University Financing Foundation and a member of the Atlanta Area Council Board of Directors, to get us kicked off. Kevin?
Hey, thank you, Andrew. Good afternoon to everybody. Welcome to this third installment, as Andrew said, of the Atlanta Area Council Scout Law Series. Our purpose for this series is to model for our community, young and old, the same type of leadership that Scouting creates in our young people. As Andrew said, my name is Kevin Byrne, and I'll moderate today's storytelling. We have 8 friends gathered who will share heroic stories which we believe will promote a time of positive reflection for you individually and a spirit of togetherness for us all. I'm an Eagle Scout, an accomplishment I achieved nearly 40 years ago. That's a long time. One of the primary character traits developed in me through Scouting was leadership. This series is about modeling leadership through the value system developed by the Boy Scouts, the Scout Law. There's 12 values in the Scout Law. A Scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. Even after 40 years, those words come immediately to mind and are, more importantly, the principles of the foundation of my character. Scouts around the world live by these values, and these values are constantly reinforced through our words and actions. 2 weeks ago, the Atlanta Area Council kicked off this series with a virtual gathering around We Are Reverent. Rodney Bullard of the Chick-fil-A Foundation moderated the discussion around the importance of faith and faithfulness. Last week, Kevin Greiner of Gas South and Eric Johnson of the Robert Woodruff Foundation moderated the discussion of helpfulness in the second installment of the series titled We Are Helpful. Both gatherings are available at the atlantabsa.org/Scout Series if you'd like to replay either of those recordings, and this session will also be recorded and available later. Today's gathering is entitled We Are Brave, the 10th point of the Scout Law. The message today will focus on inspirational stories of bravery to encourage our community, nation, and world, and we say that purposefully because we know that this gathering today will touch people from each of our 50 United States and internationally as well. We want to reinforce that a Scout is brave. We all face difficult situations, and though we may be afraid, we can overcome that fear through bravery, which comes in many forms. Scouts will do what is right despite what others might be doing or saying. Scouts understand leadership, and our hope is our stories today will inspire you to model bravery and leadership. Through today's session, we encourage you also to share your stories of bravery, especially those during this time. Use the Q&A feature on your screen to share uplifting comments throughout the program. Before I introduce our panelists in detail, I wanted to thank, though, the men and women today who are exhibiting tremendous bravery. Our frontline workers of any kind, whether they be doctors, teachers, firemen, policemen, electrical line workers, as you're going to hear about later. Our panelists are going to share inspirational stories of these workers, but before we do anything, we need to thank them as much as we can, showing the tremendous gratitude that we have for all that they do. Thank you to all of our frontline workers. Now, let me introduce my 8 friends who will share what bravery looks like to them as individuals, companies, community, and our nation. First, we have Mike Whitrock, who's the Senior Vice President of Broadband and Video Sales for AT&T. We also have Rita Breen, the Executive Director of the Georgia Power Foundation. Degas Wright, the Chief Investment Officer of Decatur Capital Management. Shane Ballard, a Deputy with the Rockdale County Sheriff's Office. Michael Smith, who's the Deputy General Manager of our tremendous, busiest, world-known Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. Eddie Myers, the Regional Vice President of PNC Bank. And Tracy Tekow, the Scout Executive and CEO of the Atlanta Area Council. Now that's only 7, and I said 8, so I'm good at math. So Before we get started, I wanted to introduce one other person. That's Eagle Scout Nigel Walker, and ask him to lead us in our invocation.
Lord, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the many people that are helping others during this time. Help us to do our best every day and forgive us when we slip. Teach us to be kind to other people and to help them at all times. Bless our parents and teachers and leaders. Help us to help others. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Nigel. Well, Nigel, don't go too far. While we have you here, before you go, would you mind sharing some thoughts? What does it mean to you to model bravery, especially during this crisis we're in the middle of? What have you learned through scouting about bravery?
Thank you. Again, I am Nigel, and I teach algebra at Banneker High School, where I have witnessed how brave our kids have been at the time like this. Overnight, I've seen scouts meeting virtually, our kids are learning virtually, our parents and supporters of scouting are adding more time in their day to encourage our kids to be brave and press on toward their goals as scouts. I've been encouraged by the kids I teach to be brave in the depths of uncertainty, because our scout law is a lifelong commitment I made when I was only 11 years old. My first summer in scouting took me to Camp Woodruff, where I looked forward to swimming, making campfires, and completing merit badges. However, on the first night at camp, I was startled by the realization that I had never been away from my family for so long. I was by myself. There are so many fears scouting requires you to face, and being alone was my first. I was in my tent, completely pitch black, and I felt alone. Each day, I would circle the camp, not only completing merit badge sessions, but also meeting other scouts from all over the state. My initial fears of being alone were assuaged by the company of all the friends I was making, some of whom I even celebrated my birthday with this past February. Many of us are at home potentially startled by the realization that we have never been alone like this before. But scouting has taught me that we are not alone. We are in the company of scouts all over, reminding us to be brave in this unpredictable time, reminding us that bravery has always been recognizing that our fears, whether on a camping trip or in a quarantine, are never greater than ourselves. So thank you for sharing this opportunity to connect with scouting and remember how important it is to be brave.
That's great, Nigel. Thank you very much. What a great model of bravery and leadership through Nigel. Now we want to move to Mike Whitrock. In his day job, Mike is, as I said, the Senior Vice President of Broadband and Video Sales at AT&T, but he's also a former Marine Gunnery Sergeant who's going to share a very motivational piece about a story called 6 Seconds to Live by Marine General John Kelly. Mike?
Yeah, thank you, Kevin, and I appreciate your the time to address the group today. And I am Mike Whitrock. I, as Kevin mentioned, work for AT&T. I'm a former Marine Gunnery Sergeant, and I'm also the chairman of the Perfect Vision Metro Classic 2020. It's the golf tournament that we host in Atlanta in support of your fine organization. So I get the opportunity to do that as well. As Kevin mentioned, I wanted to start just with a quick story today from General John Kelly. And this was a speech that he gave in 2010. At the time, then Lieutenant General John Kelly was a senior military assistant to Defense Secretary Robert Gates. He gave this speech on November 13, 2010, which is a significant date. It was in St. Louis, but it was 4 days after his own son, First Lieutenant Robert Kelly, who is a Marine, was killed in action in Afghanistan. And this is just a small part of that speech. And as Kevin mentioned, it's called 6 Seconds to Live. General Kelly said when he was the commander of all U.S. and Iraqi forces in 2008, 2 Marine infantry battalions, 1-9 and 2-8, were switching out in Ramadi. One of those battalions was starting its 7-month combat tour, and the other one was finishing its deployment. 2 Marines, Corporal Jonathan Yale and Lance Corporal Jordan Harder, 22 and 20 years old, respectively, one from each battalion, were assuming a watch at the entrance gate of an outpost. It contained a makeshift barracks that housed 50 Marines, and the same ramshackle building was also home to 100 Iraqi police. They were our U.S. allies in the fight against terrorists in Ramadi, and at that time, Ramadi was considered the most dangerous city on earth. It was owned by Al-Qaeda. Yale was a dirt poor mixed race kid from Virginia. He had a wife, a mother, and a sister, all who lived with him and he supported. And he did this on a yearly salary of less than $23,000. Harder, on the other hand, was a middle-class white kid from Long Island. They were from two completely different worlds. Had they not joined the Marines, they would have never met each other or understood that multiple Americas exist simultaneously, depending on one's race, ethnicity, religious affiliation, education level, economic status, or where someone might have been born. But they were Marines. They were United States citizens and patriots. They were forged in the same crucible, and because of that bond, they were close or closer than if they were born of the same woman. Now, the mission orders they received from their sergeant squad leader, I'm sure, went something like this. Okay, take charge of this post and let no unauthorized personnel or vehicles pass. Are you clear? I'm also sure that their answer was something like, yes, Sergeant, with just enough of an attitude as they rolled their eyes that said, no kidding, sweetheart, we know what we're doing. They relieved 2 other Marines and took their posts at entry control point at a joint security station near Ramadi in the Al-Anbar province of Iraq. And a few minutes later, a large blue truck turned down that alleyway that's only about 60 to 70 yards in length, started speeding its way through the serpentine concrete Jersey walls, and the truck stopped just short of where the 2 Marines were posted and detonated, killing them both. 24 brick masonry houses were damaged. A mosque 100 yards away collapsed. The truck's engine came to rest 200 yards away, knocking down most of the house before it stopped. The explosive experts estimated that this bomb had about 2,000 pounds of explosives. But because these 2 young infantrymen didn't have it in their DNA to run from danger, they held their post and stood their ground. They also saved 150 of their Iraqi and American brother in arms. Now, when General Kelly read the situation report, he called the regimental commander for details because something about this just seemed different to him. I know that Marine leaders expect Marines, regardless of their rank or MOS, to stand their ground and do their duty and even die if that's what it takes to accomplish the mission. But this just seemed different to him. So he decided to personally investigate, and he traveled to Ramadi and spoke to a half a dozen Iraqi police who witnessed the event. And all of the Iraqi police accounts were the same. They all said they knew immediately what was going on as soon as the 2 Marines began firing. And they were amazed at the bravery of these 2 young men. Some of them tried to also fire at the truck, but ended up running for cover as the truck got closer. One of those Iraqi police said, and he quotes, that how could any sane man do this? Why would they not run like any normal man would to save his own life? And what he didn't know up until then, and what he learned that very instant, was these Marines were different. They were not normal. You know, what General Kelly didn't know at that time, and what he learned after he submitted both Yale and Harder for posthumous Navy crosses, was that there was a security camera that was blown many blocks away that captured the entire attack. And General Kelly got to sit down and watch that video. And it happened exactly the way the Iraqi police had described it. It took exactly 6 seconds from when the truck entered the alley until it detonated. He got to watch the last 6 seconds of these young Marines' lives. I suppose it took about a second or 2 for the Marines to separately come to the same conclusion about what was going on once the truck came into their view at the far end of the alley. No time to talk it over, no time to call their sergeant and ask what they should do. Only enough time to take an instant to think about it and about what their sergeant told them to do a few minutes before. let no unauthorized personnel or vehicles pass. It took maybe another 2 seconds for them to present their weapons, take aim, and open up. And by that time, the truck was halfway through the barriers and gaining speed. And the recording also shows a number of Iraqi police, some of whom had fired their AKs, were now scattering like the normal and rational men that they were, some running right past those Marines who had 3 seconds left to live. For about 2 seconds more, the recording shows the Marines firing their weapons nonstop. The truck windshield explodes into shards of glass, and the rounds start striking the driver, who is trying to get past them to kill their brothers, American and Iraqi, bedded down in the barracks behind them, totally unaware that their lives at that moment depended entirely on 2 Marines standing their ground. Yell and Harder never hesitated. By all reports and by the recording, they never stepped back. They never even shifted their weight. With their feet spread shoulder width apart, they leaned into danger, firing as fast as they could. They only had 1 second left to live. And by the recording, he said he thinks they knew it. The truck explodes, the camera goes blank. 2 young men go to their God. 6 seconds. Not enough time to think about their families, their country, their flag, or their lives or deaths, but enough time for 2 very brave young men to do their duty. Now, this story from General Kelly touches on a very important and foundational understanding, in my view, of where bravery comes from. And I think it's inherently decided from the decision to selflessly serve that of others. This is a story about 2 young Americans that initially decided to look past their own comfortable lives and volunteer to serve. It was that same selfless devotion to duty that caused them to stand up bravely in the face of adversity to protect each other, to protect the Marines and Iraqi soldiers behind them, and to protect their way of life. They gave their lives for the freedom of the human race, but I think it's fitting to remember these 2 brave Americans, especially coming off of this past Memorial Day. But it's also an important lesson to all of us. And I think that's captured so perfectly in the Scout Law: to help other people at all times, to keep yourself physically strong, mentally awake, and morally straight. I think bravery will come effortlessly and seamlessly to those type of people that focus on those values to help others. I think you are all among the best of our youth today because you've also made a brave decision already. You've decided to pursue this path that you're on now and this journey that you've embarked upon. I think the continued focus on helping others will cause us all to act very quickly in the face of adversity, because we won't be considering ourselves, but we'd rather be considering how our service can help others. I really appreciate the time to be able to address you today. And Kevin, with that, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Mike. I'm going to have a hard time speaking now. Very captivating, very inspirational, but I think it's going to be a theme that we'll hear in several other of these stories about the integration of the Scout Oath and Law into everything that we do. Even if these young men were not Scouts, they live out those principles that are so front and center to the Scouts. Next, we're going to move to Rita Breen. As I said, Rita is the executive director of the Georgia Power Foundation. And we say thank goodness for her, because we are all beneficiaries today because of the work that she and her colleagues at Georgia Power do. At Georgia Power, they're always on. Whether it's a beautiful day, an icy day, a snowy day, a hurricane, or even a pandemic, they're always on. Rita's going to share a story. First, she's going to share a video with us. So let's play the video, and then Rita, you have the floor.
Southern Company employees from across the system are working around the clock to keep energy flowing to our customers and communities, no matter what. Hear firsthand stories of colleagues staying committed and resilient through it all. These are the faces of our front line.
My name is Tina Williams. I'm a customer service analyst with Georgia Power, and I've been employed with them for 37 years. To protect the safety and the health of our employees during the COVID-19 pandemic, Our organization made the decision to allow everyone to telework. I played a key role in transitioning over 300 employees from working in the office to working from home. The main goal was to make this a seamless process with minimal interruptions, and unbeknownst to our customers, our business never closes. Our customers are our main priority. A typical workday for me during the pandemic has been to ensure that the reps are up and running, they have the proper tools and support that they need. It includes me working with IT to troubleshoot computers and system issues. It also entails me securing headset adapters. By ordering the USB adapters, this allowed the reps that did not have a landline to be able to work from home as well, and teaching the reps how to use the applications. What motivates me to stay committed during this pandemic time are the consultants, knowing that they're on the other end of the phone with our customers. So when I get that call from a rep at 2 a.m., I'm going to answer the call and I'm going to help. With us working together, over 300 employees were able to be relocated from the center in a 2-week time span. I've never seen anything like this during my time with the company. I learned that I am resilient, I am able to adapt very quickly, and I've learned new IT skills. This is something that I can be proud of. This experience has shown what we can accomplish when we all work together.
Hi, everybody. I'm Rita Breen, and delighted to be with you today to talk about some of these inspirational stories of bravery. And as you just saw some of our workers, our frontline people maybe don't think of as much as like what we just celebrated with Memorial Day. Of course, all of our heroes in the military who have given their lives, or just the story that we that you just heard earlier on this broadcast, as well as, of course, all the workers that are fighting for the lives of our family, friends, and neighbors that are doing all the wonderful work in healthcare. Well, I wanted to tell you about our personal heroes, and that is some of our co-workers who work every day, whether it's sunny, snowy, pandemic, hurricane, etc. So, most of us are very dependent on electricity, right? When you're at home, and a lot of us are spending a lot of time at home right now, that switch, just comes on, you flip it, and magically the power comes on. So at Georgia Power and other utilities across the country, across the world, really, all of these workers have to always be on, right? Because power can go out at any time. And it can be anything from a car accident that happens, even on a beautiful day, that knocks out a pole, or to major catastrophic events like hurricanes. In Georgia, we sometimes certainly get hit by those. But then others that have hit, other parts of the United States. Some of you may remember hurricanes like Katrina that were really devastated in the Southeast. Our workers are trained very well. PPE is now something that I think has become a vernacular for everyone. Everyone now knows what PPE is, but in our industry, it's a little bit different because electricity, of course, is is dangerous. And so our workers are trained well. They always wear their PPE, and they, much like Boy Scouts during bad weather, are ready to go. Sometimes they are having to pack for a week or more because they will travel to either parts of our state. Of course, that is our territory at Georgia Power, is the state of Georgia. But with other utilities, we also have agreements to help each other out, again, much like Boy Scouts would, to travel to, it could be New York, it could be the Carolinas, Florida, any part, really. Usually it's in the Southeast or the kind of the Eastern board that we would go to help, but we go and other utilities come and help us to make sure that everybody gets their power restored quickly. So my hat is off to these brave men and women that do this each and every day to make sure that the world is powered by electricity, and that we can all do the things like we're doing right now to be able to enjoy this broadcast. So thank you very much. An honor to be with y'all today, and salute to all the heroes, to everyday heroes that are doing this work.
Thank you, Rita. The first thing that comes to my mind as I hear that is the Boy Scout motto, be prepared. I know your frontline workers are prepared to go out in any circumstance, just as I'm prepared to flip the switch and have the electricity come on. So thank you, Rita, for that. Next, I want to introduce Degas Wright. Degas, as I said earlier, is the Chief Investment Officer at Decatur Capital Management, but he has another special trait. He's a West Point graduate, served as a captain in the U.S. Army, and he's going to share some personal comments, very personal comments, about using the word fear as an acronym for being brave. Degas?
Thank you, Calvin, for that introduction. And it's my pleasure to be part of this discussion, particularly during this time of pandemic and the devastating recent acts of racism. This inspirational discussion is even more important. A Scout is brave. Being brave is not the absence of fear, but how we overcome fear. As a child, I was a late talker, and when I did speak, kids made fun of me. And because of that, I became very fearful of speaking because of embarrassment. So today I'm going to use the word fear as a mnemonic. The letter F. F stands for find out. My parents were concerned about my speech, and they talked to my kindergarten teacher, and I was tested and found out that I had problems making certain sounds to form words. I was in a speech program for about 3 years. F, find out. E, engage. My speech therapist would give me words on 3x5 cards, and I had to practice making those sounds where I could form words. I had to work really hard at it. I can even recall playing a game, a Go Fish game with word cards, and I had to say the words correctly to win the game. E, engage. A, accept assistance. My speech therapist would give me the cards, the word cards to take home, and my mother would assist me in practicing. And I continued to practice. Once I finished the speech program, my mother encouraged me to sign up for Bookmobile, because with that, I was able to continue to read words out loud and practice pronouncing the words. She would get so excited when I completed the summer reading list. So I had this assistance from my mother, and today my wife assists me with saying words that may be difficult for me. Even my adult kids assist me because they know Dad would mispronounce words often. So A, accept assistance. R stands for rejoice, because you will be successful as you overcome your fears. I recall when we were playing that card game with my speech therapist, the Go Fish game, as I pronounced the words correctly, he would cheer and celebrate with me as I won the game. I remember another event. In high school, I was selected to give the graduation speech. And this was going to be in Columbus, Georgia, graduated from Columbus High, and I was going to be speaking in the largest auditorium in the city, a big stage. The selection committee did not know that I had a speech problem, but my mother did. And she asked me, do you want to do the speech? I had to overcome my fear and say, yes, I would. On the morning of the speech, I walked up to the podium, and I couldn't see my mother in the audience, but I gave the speech. Afterwards, she gave me the biggest hug. Rejoice. So let's review. When I had the opportunity to give the high school graduation speech, I recall the fear mnemonic word, and it started off with F, find out. I avoided using words that I had difficulty saying. E, engage. I had to practice that speech a lot because I knew that if I became nervous, I would mispronounce words. So E, engage. A, accept assistance. Every day as I practiced that speech, my mother listened to it probably hundreds of times. So I had to accept her assistance. A, accept assistance. And then R, the day that I gave that speech, after the speech, my mother and I rejoiced. So the rest of the story, I've given many speeches since that high school graduation speech. And the biggest stage so far is that I presented sustainability disclosures in a testimony to the United States Congress in July of 2019. So once a scout is brave. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Degas. And we rejoice and celebrate with you and for you for modeling great bravery and great leadership. Thank you for that fantastic story. Next, I think we all are going to straighten up in our chairs, sit up straight, because our next speaker is Shane Ballard, who's a deputy with the Rockdale County Sheriff's Department. And he is going to speak on just a wonderful topic about fostering children and dealing with COVID and how it has impacted his family. Shane, welcome.
Thanks, Kevin. Well, good afternoon. My name is Shane Ballard, and I'm currently an SRO and Explorer Advisor for the Rockdale County Sheriff's Office. We are brave. I'm here to share some of my experiences of being brave in my time in law enforcement, as well as I hope it's an inspirational story that would not have happened without my career in law enforcement as well as exploring. A little backstory: while in high school, I wanted to go into law enforcement. So I went to college, majoring in criminal justice. I ended up going another path with a family business. About 10 years later, I found my way back and became a deputy with the Rockdale County Sheriff's Office. A lot of people say they get into it to help people. I really wanted to, but more so, I wanted to help with the youth. We have to try and make a difference in their lives at a young age. With so much negativity with law enforcement and gangs getting into our kids at a young age. I had a young girl at my school one day who was new. And like all my new kids, I introduced myself and let them know that I'm here for them if they ever need anything. She told me that her mom said the police are bad, and I was able to change her mind, change her mom's perspective, and she eventually went out of her way to say hi to me every day. I come from a big family as well as a baseball family, and I began coaching baseball while also still playing high school ball. I never stopped and even coached my middle school softball team. What was crazy is while working at the Rockdale County Sheriff's Office work release program, one of my kids that had coached had just gotten hired at the Sheriff's Office. And he was doing his rounds and he stopped by where I was at. I was like, oh my goodness. So I've been working with the youth for some time. And when I went to the SO, I told them that I wanted to become an SRO one day, as well as a CHAMPS instructor. I always remember my DARE officer with the City of Covenant Police Department, Officer Paul Daly. So that's what gave me my motivation and helped want me to be a CHAMPS instructor. My opportunity finally came, and I interviewed and got into the SRO position at Conyers Middle School, later a CHAMPS instructor. I was asked not long after that to becoming an SRO, I would be the Explorer Advisor. That was a big step, leading a bunch of youth, preparing the meetings every week, scheduling training and competitions, and keeping a budget, because it takes money to run an Explorer program. I took a small group of 4 explorers, and now we average over 20 explorers. I've had several go into the join on at the Sheriff's Office. So 3 years ago, me and my wife were given an opportunity to adopt one of my explorers. If you talk about being brave, that was a lot to grasp. A 16-year-old girl, we already have 2 boys at home. On her 17th birthday, she officially became our daughter. She has had to overcome so much in her life and had to top it off. She's a senior this year. And all the seniors have had to miss out for so many of the memories that are made during your senior year. We all know that. For a young lady who years ago was not even sure if she would finish school, much less graduate, has graduated high school with an 8 on the 8 honor roll. We picked up her diploma in a drive-thru yesterday. She will be attending Georgia Southwestern in the fall, majoring in criminal justice, to eventually become a deputy sheriff. She wants to be like me. By adopting her, it led me and my wife to open our doors to foster more children. I see so many kids in my line of work through the Sheriff's Office that need somebody. They need somebody to help them, need guidance. So we're currently fostering a beautiful 15-month-old little girl that we got at just 4 weeks old, straight out of the hospital. As we're dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, we as deputies come in contact with people constantly on a day-by-day basis. It is tough not knowing if that person you encounter with that day could have it, or you could be bringing it home to your family. As we continue to navigate through this pandemic, just know that our whole country and our world is dealing with the same thing, and that we're all in this together, and we'll get through it. I thank you for your time, and have a great day and stay safe. Turn it back over to you, Kevin.
Thank you, Shane. That's a tremendously heartwarming story. I thank you so much for what you do for fostering children and adopting children. That's fantastic, but also your service on a daily basis. It's an inspirational story of bravery. Thank you, Shane.
Thank you.
Our next storyteller is Michael Smith. As I mentioned, Michael is the Deputy General Manager of Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, where there's a few people that probably on this call have gone through before. Michael's going to share a couple of stories of the acts of bravery that he has seen while working at the world's busiest airport.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Kevin. And thank you to the Atlanta Area Council for inviting me to share in today's program. Like those before me, I would like to express my gratitude to those who gave the ultimate sacrifice, and thank those who have served and are serving our country now. Being a scout was a vital part of my growing up, and its principles have helped guide me throughout my life and my career. I was in a scout family. My mother was a den mother, my father a scoutmaster, I was a scout and a scoutmaster. My son was a scout and now a firefighter. And it was an honor for me to now be serving on the board. I had fun memories and learned lots of lessons as a scout. One of the things I came across most recently was my 1968 badge for selling tickets to the Scout Exposition. The value statement that we're touching on today, bravery, affects us all on so many levels and is so essential to life. It speaks to character, integrity, perseverance, and faith. For some, bravery is some individual, oversized, heroic accomplishment like those described by Mike. Others may consider it brave to wear white after Labor Day. Actually, bravery is somewhere in the middle and is displayed by everyday people every day. That kind of bravery is more common, yet invisible to the rest of us. If you remember the old antiperspirant commercial that used the tagline, "Never let them see you sweat." Within that tagline are foundational truths about bravery. One is that you have fears, and two, that despite them, you move forward anyway. Or as Franklin P. Jones put it, bravery is being the only one who knows you're afraid. The only time many people think that a man or a woman can be brave is when he or she is afraid. The key to bravery is facing those fears and not allowing them to stop us. You never see it on their faces, but it's there with doctors, the nurses, the hospital, janitorial personnel, and all the critical personnel on the front lines of this pandemic. I see bravery every day at the world's busiest airport. In 2019, 110 million passengers traveled through our airport. That's approximately 300,000 people a day, roughly the population of Orlando, Florida. Coming from 150 US cities or more, 45 countries. Those passengers were greeted by 63,000 employees representing customs, TSA, the airlines, our concessions, our police, our fire, our maintenance, and many more folks that are here as well as those who are working home. Our 2020 outlook was robust and seemed headed for a 2 to 3% growth in the number of passengers traversing our airport. Those projections, however, disappeared in March as the pandemic gripped the world and our industry. The number of passengers dropped drastically, employees for support operations were laid off, and stores closed. But airport operations have never stopped. It remains open because brave employees, those labeled as essential or mission critical, show up every day to clean, sanitize our facility. They mow the airfield, they repair one-way lights, they maintain the air traffic control tower, they protect, and they serve. Despite the fear that they could contract the virus, they choose to move forward. I have seen bravery in employees who step forward to administer CPR to a passenger or a fellow employee who suffered a heart attack, and in the employee who jumped in to stop a moving car before it rolled back on the driver who forgot to put it in park. Bravery is there in the photo of Arlington National Cemetery. It's beneath the headstones of those who gave all in the service to our nation, those who we just honored on Memorial Day. Bravery is there within each of us to pursue whatever goals or dreams or life-changing decisions we face. Even when we cannot see our next step, we move forward because everything we want is on the other side of fear. Because of this pandemic, fear is omnipresent, but so too is God. Be encouraged by that and lean unto your faith and fortitude and do whatever you want to do. Remember, we are brave. Kevin and the council, thank you, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Well, thank you, Michael, for the depth of your scouting family. Thank you for telling us that, but also the depth of your bravery on a daily basis as you see folks back and forth. I desperately miss you. My last trip through Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport was March 4th, and I'm hoping within the next couple of weeks, I'll get to see you again. I look forward to it. Thank you, Michael. Now we want to move to Eddie Matthews. Eddie is currently the Regional Vice President of PNC Bank, but he's got a very interesting background, as do all of our panelists today. Eddie played 5 preseasons and 1 full season for the Atlanta Falcons while trying to manage his tour of duty with the Marine Corps. Once his tour of duty was complete, he joined the Falcons roster as a free agent in 1987. While Eddie has many talents, he earned a degree in finance while dreaming of getting into investment banking. Eddie's not able to join us on Zoom today. He's on the phone. And so, Eddie, please share your story with us.
Thank you, Kevin, and appreciate it. Kevin said it's Eddie Matthews, it's Eddie Meyers. So what I'd like to do today is I'd like to share 2 short stories with you and give you some thoughts from my background, because I've had I've done a lot of different things and different various things in my life, and I've had a lot of different life experiences. But the first thing I did in anticipation of this, I looked up the definition of brave. The definition of brave is having or showing mental or moral strength to face danger, fear, or difficulty. Having or showing courage. As I've gone through my life and having kids, there's a couple things that I've stated to my kids over the years. One of the things is putting other people first, having strength of character, having discipline, doing the next right thing, having integrity, and always, in all things, I've always told my kids to acknowledge your fears. Face your fears, acknowledge it, and use that to strengthen you. Because fear has a way of allowing you to focus on the task at hand and getting things done. And I've experienced that personally, and I'll tell you a story about that. So the first story I'd like to share with you is one thing that Kevin did not say is I have a daughter, Ilana Myers Taylor, who's a 3-time Olympian. But in her last Olympic quest, 2 weeks before the Olympics, and she's a winter Olympic athlete, she's a bobsledder, 2 weeks before she flew into South Korea, she tore her Achilles. We didn't know that. We flew on over. We didn't know that. She knew that. We found out once we got in the country that she arrived in a wheelchair. But she tore her Achilles. She still decided that she was going to compete at the end of the day. Why? Who knows when our next Olympics was going to come up? Who knows what you can achieve? It was a partial tear, and she just felt that at the end of the day, she'd been training long enough. Her team depended on her, and it's a two-man bobsled, so she has another young lady who had been working with her for a number of years. So her team depended on her, and she said, I'm going to try to do as best as I can, facing the fact that I could rupture this thing, and I'm going to compete. At the end of the day, she raced, she set a track record, she set a push record, and at the end of the day, she was awarded silver medal, her second silver medal. My next story concerns me. In 1991, I was the commanding officer as a captain. I was the commanding officer of 75 men in the Gulf War. We were placed with 1st Marine Division. I was placed with 1st Marine Division on the Kuwaiti-Saudi border. We had a Marine Corps recon platoon in front of us. That's all we had. Later during the day, while we were putting our gear together and getting settled, I had a Marine from that recon platoon come to our position and say, sir, you've got tanks coming right to your position. You need to get these men out of here. Knowing the armament that I had 4 60 caliber machine guns, 2 50 caliber machine guns, and all those were going to do if you fire at a tank was going to just piss off the tank. They would be ineffective. So what I decided to do at that point in time, since I only had a deuce and a half, which is 1 truck, I did not have the capacity to take my men and go back to the rear. So I turned to my, I had a first lieutenant who was a communications officer, and I asked him that, because we didn't have comms at the time, I told him that in 2 minutes I wanted to talk to the world. He ran off and he said, aye sir, ran off. And while he was off, I took some time to bend the knee and say a prayer. Because this was the first time in my life that I had ever feared death. In fact, I felt that, I had to prepare myself to die because we didn't have anything to protect ourselves against tanks and against these Iraqis. So at the end of the day, I realized that my faith helped me help settle myself, because I was honestly the most scared I've been in my entire life. But it settled me and allowed me to think about my next steps. And that my next steps turned to my men. So I got my gunnery sergeant. I told him, I said, get the men to dig in. When it gets dark, we're going to be dug in, and we set up our killing zones. And I told my gunnery sergeant that when those tanks come upon us, we're not going to fire a shot. He said, why, sir? I said, because it's going to be, there's no moon. It's going to be so dark, more than likely those tanks will drive by us. And if we fire a shot, they'll know exactly where we are, and we could take massive casualties. He said, aye, sir. Went off, spoke to the men. Meanwhile, my comm officer came back to me and said, sir, we've got comm. So I got a general on the line, and his name was General Krulak. He says to me, Captain, we are aware of your position, and so hold your position. I said, sir, with what? I've got 4 60s and 2 50s, and all that's going to do is piss off a tank. He says, he yells at me at that point in time, Captain Meyers, hold your position. I said, aye, sir. And my men were dug in. And we were ready. We got ourselves ready for battle, and everybody got prepared. What the general did not tell me at the time is he had sent a tow company hard forward to our position to knock out the tanks, and we saw the battle take place in front of us about midnight or so. Took place in front of us, and we were all spared, and my troops lived. But what I learned out of that position, what I learned out of that period of time in my life is that fear does work. Fear helps you. Fear focuses you and allows you to do the next right thing. And I'd just like to share one thing. I listen to a lot of, I read a lot, and I listen to a lot of different sayings. And I'd just like to share one saying that I have that's meaningful by Alan Turing. He said, "Sometimes it is the people that no one imagines anything of who do the things that no one can imagine." And I'd just like to leave you with that. But thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to share with you. And hopefully you have heard something during my period here that crystallizes the understanding that being brave is all about understanding what you're faced with and doing the next right thing. Thank you very much.
Eddie, thank you. You have said a lot of things that are very inspirational to us, and I apologize for calling you Eddie Matthews. Shane got me thinking about baseball and our great Atlanta Braves.
That's quite all right.
But thank you, Eddie.
That's all right.
For sharing with us. So next, we're gonna wrap up with Tracy Teckow, who is the Scout Executive and CEO of the Atlanta Area Council, who I know will also share some very inspirational words. Tracy?
Thank you, Kevin. I don't know if I'm on par with these speakers that we've had. What incredible stories. Kevin, you and I are the bookends of this, but boy, the middle has been fantastic. How honored we are to have these men and women representing the concept, the notion, the value of bravery, and speaking on behalf of their companies, their experiences, but tied back into the Atlanta Area Council Boy Scouts of America, really illustrating what it is we work to do to serve 30,000 children in our community every day, every month, year after year. Bravery, that's an important part of the Scout law. So for my comments today, I went to my little library over here, and I pulled up one of my favorite old Boy Scout handbooks. This one I think is from the mid-1920s, and a lot of great Americans on it, and a scout right in the middle. And I looked up a quote, and it's actually from a 1919 Scout handbook, and Baden Powell, the founder of Scouting, wrote, "A scout never flinches in danger. They know what they must do in case of panic. They train their mind to act. In all emergencies, they set an example of resourcefulness, coolness, courage, and considers others before themselves. Scouts serve their country, their God, and to be prepared." Those words were written over 100 years ago, yet they're timeless. That could have been from the 2020 Scout handbook, and those words would have been just as important in their words about bravery. So in my comments today, I want to reference two questions, all right? And I'll ask the question and then I'll answer the question. But my first question is do we still live in a society where it's important to be brave? And that may sound a bit rhetorical, but if you think about it, a lot of what we do in society, and this is just normal society, we kind of get together, we make agreements, and we kind of work as teams, and that's all really important. But sometimes we have to step out and step above, like our speakers just talked about being brave and taking a risk. We need people to be brave to tell the truth. We need people to be brave to stare down the forces of oppression. We need people to be brave to stretch out of their comfort zone. We need people to be brave to take risks in their everyday life. So society clearly needs bravery as a fundamental driving value. I'm pleased with our representative from the Rockdale County Sheriff's Office, Shane, talked about his work. And, you know, the streets are more safe because men and women put on the uniform in law enforcement. We had 3 veterans speak to us today. And again, we timed this to be within the week of Memorial Day. And we're so grateful for the United States Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines, and the Coast Guard for upholding the value of bravery every day. So clearly bravery is important in our society today. All right, so my next question, which I will ask and I will answer, is, are there institutions in society that still are teaching the value of being brave? And yes, in many places for sure, but clearly that is a very focused skill and an important value taught by the Boy Scouts of America. In the Atlanta Area Council, we teach that skill, that value rather, to 30,000 scouts, as I've said. So imagine a scout, imagine one of those 30,000 children to stand up each week, to be brave, to stand up each week in front of their parents, their friends, their peers, and their scout leaders, and to make the scout sign like that, and to pledge the scout law to be trustworthy, loyal, helpful, etc., and to be brave. A scout internalizes that week after week, month after month, year after year. It becomes a part of their conscious and subconscious identity that they are brave. But we go beyond just teaching the rhetorical concept of being brave. We actually give our scouts a chance to be brave. And bravery really starts as a child with doing something that you're fearful of, as was talked about earlier in our presentation about overcoming fears. So beyond simply saying the oath, our scouts get out and get a chance to do things that require bravery, i.e. getting up in front of their troop and speaking. Overcoming their fear of public speaking requires bravery. To be brave, to throw on a backpack and go up a trail through the woods, through the forest, somewhere they've never seen, over rough terrain on a long day and a hot hike, that requires bravery not to quit and then to come back the next Saturday and do it again. We think about camping, you know, and how much bravery does it take? I think considerable bravery for a child, 11 years old, to go on a camp out away from the comfort of home, to sleep in a tent and listen to those sounds in the forest that can be very intimidating. As adults, we know that that might be just the wind rustling the leaves or a squirrel walking off in a distance. But as a child, alone or with another scout in a tent, listening, your mind can be challenged, and a scout is brave and learns to overcome those fears, and bravery becomes their trait. So these small steps and hundreds of more steps that we teach our scouts beginning in childhood helps them to be brave. So thank you for listening to my perspective. Thank you for supporting scouting and the concept of being brave in all 12 points of the Scout Law. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. And, you know, we all didn't know how lucky we were several years ago when you moved from Illinois down here to Atlanta, but we're so grateful and so thankful for your leadership. Thank you also to Nigel, to Mike, to Rita, to Degas, to Shane, to Michael, and to Eddie for your inspirational stories. The marketing material, I think we would all agree, did not exaggerate. These were some incredible stories of bravery. I want to close with a couple of comments, though, that will reinforce what we've heard and are repetitive to what we've heard. Many of you know me and know the great admiration I have for my son, Thomas. Thomas is 12 and a very ordinary young man. He's extraordinary to his mother and me, but he's a typical middle schooler. And I have the pleasure of taking Thomas to school most days. And from the very first days of pre-K, and even before, I started a ritual with him. He has to either listen to me or say to himself 6 different phrases. 2 of them are be a leader, and Eddie's favorite, do the next right thing. Before he gets out of the car, he has to say those. It sounds pretty simple, right? But it does take tremendous bravery to constantly do the next right thing and be a leader. The good news is if you constantly do the next right thing, it's going to be hard for you to get in much trouble. And so far, he's done a pretty good job of doing that. But my purpose in telling you this is that you don't have to have military foes or work on electrical wires or work in law enforcement or face international passengers to be brave. Bravery can be modeled every day by doing the next right thing and being a leader. And all the stories that were shared today were about doing the next right thing and being a leader. These are phrases that Thomas has heard every day for 12 years of life, and he's never going to forget them, just like I'll never forget the 12 points of the Scout Law. And my encouragement to you is to plagiarize those phrases, repeat them to your children, to yourself. Come up with your own phrases that can promote bravery to do the next right thing, especially in the face of adversity. And finally, my contention is that all of my friends that shared stories today shared stories not only because they are brave, but also because they are trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, clean, and reverent. The Scout Law is an integrated set of values that work exceptionally well together. These values are for everyone, and that ultimately is the purpose of the Atlanta Area Council hosting these gatherings, so that we can model leadership through the values embodied in the Scout Law. Thank you to Andrew, to Jenna, to Barton, to Amanda, to Alexis, and the rest of the staff in the Atlanta Area Council for your work to put this together. And thank you, Tracy, again, for your leadership and bravery to lead this group of folks. We look forward to seeing everybody on June 17th for the next installment, which is We Are Cheerful. Thank you for joining us. Have a great afternoon. Stay safe and healthy. And this formally concludes our gathering. Thank you.